Good day, everybody. I am Jeff Hardy. Welcome to your webinar today. Our webinar is titled Our Friends the Machines. That's controversial, right? Not exactly the Terminator. Our Friends the Machines. How AI and automation empowers service providers to address cyber threats. We are going to take and jump right into it. Let me start by just doing some housekeeping things. First of all, if you have questions, we're going to try to save some time at the end for Q&A, and we want to take your questions live. So there's a Q&A function there here in Zoom. You probably know where it is. You've attended a few of these things. It's probably at the bottom of your screen. So enter your questions there, and we will try to get to them at the end so we can answer real life questions. In addition, I always know that we have people who follow us and see my broadcasts on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So my DMs are open, guys. So if you know me personally and you want to send me a DM question, just let me know. I'm happy to take and add those into the mix. Remember that the conference is being recorded. And that means that if my face will be there, but if you take and ask a question, your name might be mentioned. Just remember that. And at the end, we're going to email you a link to the recording and the materials afterwards, because at the end we have some reference materials for you, some things you can download, some special offers if you're so inclined that you can take advantage of. Those are all at the end, and so you're going to want to have access to those. So be looking for your email as well. So there you go. So let's move forward. Joining me today will be Roy Darnell from Perception Point, and Roy's an expert in machine learning. Also on the call is Candid Wüest. Candid's like super smart, and he does a lot of cyber protection research for us at Acronis. He's VP there. And of course, I'm Jeff Hardy. We will also be joined later on for a brief demo by Dan Scanlon, and we look forward to all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get things going. So here we go. This is our agenda today. We're going to start with some information from Candid about expanding cyber threat landscape. Then we're going to have a brief panel discussion about that. Then, Roy is going to come in and talk about Perception Points, what you're doing, Perception Point, what they're doing with AI and automation. Then Candid will do the same thing from an Acronis perspective. Finally, Dan's going to join us, give us a little bit of look inside the box and show us a demo and give us a little narration over the top. And then we'll end with a live audience Q&A, followed by resources and wrap up. So that's going to be a full hour. Let's get to it. Let's start. Let's just start off on the right foot. Let me welcome to the stage or the screen. What do we call this thing on Zoom? Let me welcome to the stage, Candid Wüest. Candid, let's talk about the expanding cyber threat landscape. What do you have, my friend?
Thank you, Jeff, for the introduction, and welcome also from my end. So it's my pleasure to kind of talk about all the interesting things that we see, of course, happening there out there in the cyberspace. And I think it comes by no surprise if we say that malicious emails are still the #1 vector of infection. Depending on which statistic you believe in, it's about 90 to 94% of all the malware is actually delivered through emails. We see some kind of changes there. Used to be a lot of malicious macro, where you have to activate the macro and then you get yourself infected. Nowadays, at the moment, it's very popular to have some link files in an ISO or a RAR zip file. They do experiment, of course, to get through. And we see that they experiment a lot of things as well, like they try to get past your two-factor authentication, or basically getting that token as well. Some of them, they even use QR codes just to break the habit, as of course, people, they will take their smartphone and follow the QR code, as we all have trained them. On the other hand, we've seen many vulnerable systems being attacked. At the moment, very much in fashion, the Microsoft Exchange server, which has a vulnerability that allows for remote code execution. And unfortunately, yes, there have been many in different VPN services, Microsoft DNS. Of course, RDP with a weak password is kind of a vulnerability itself. I always call RDP kind of the ransomware delivery protocol, as it's so frequently used to actually get malware onto systems. On the other hand, we also see that the whole trust relationship is misused. You might have heard about software supply chain attacks, like SolarWinds or Kaseya last year. But of course, we also see that service providers are in the crosshair of the attackers, because the attackers, they love to get their hands on those deployment tools, like PSA or RMM tools, which allow the attackers to uninstall any security software and then roll out their malware to all their systems, including the ones of the customers. It's kind of the living off the land. So you use what's already there to their benefit, and unfortunately that means they have an easy target, and they of course love to multiply their victims. On the other hand, we also seen many moving to the cloud, right? Cloud services, very popular, quite dynamic to adapt to kind of new things. There's some good applications there, of course, as well. But we also saw that many of those do have weak authentication. There's recently been a automotive brand which had their API key out there for 5 years. So for 5 years, they had an API key on GitHub that allowed people to access customer-related data. It's probably not what you want to have, because that, of course, leads to data breaches. And we've seen that more and more of those APIs are unfortunately exposed and not very well documented, and therefore might be exploited or might do things that you not think they do or they're not intended to do. And very often all of those different avenues, they lead to ransomware. Ransomware is still one of the most, I wouldn't say prevalent one by numbers, but of course disrupting threats. Because if you get hit by ransomware, nowadays it's no longer just disrupting you by encrypting your data, bringing your organization to a halt. It's also stealing and exfiltrating data. So the attackers, they have long learned, of course, that some people do have a backup. And I personally hope, of course, that you have one, that you have tested, that you know that it works, like the one from Acronis. But we've seen that even if you do have one, if they steal all your customer data, well, you still have to think about it, right? Because that might lead to privacy fines under GDPR or other regulations. And of course, your customers are not going to be happy as well if those double extortions happening and the people are kind of stealing all your details. So this is definitely something which we need to control further. And we've seen that the ransomware techniques have evolved as well. So they try to push on as much pressure as possible. So besides stealing your data, they will also do distributed denial of service attack or going directly after your customer saying, hey, by the way, organization X has been compromised. Please give them a nice friendly reminder that they should pay the ransom. On the other hand, don't make the mistake that they would not know about you and they would not know you. They definitely do. I mean, they might not know you before they have been breaching your network, but once you're inside, they will look around. They will find your cyber insurance policy. They will know exactly how much money they can ask you for. They know which are the interesting files, and they will exfiltrate those. And of course, they are adapting as well. We've seen that they're implanting backdoors into all the backups. So if you don't scan them, you might actually get a backdoor back once you do a restore. Or they sign their malware with stolen digital certificates just to bypass classical malware scanning. And just to give you an idea how that actually looks, here's a quick demo on how a ransomware is created by the bad guys. So for example, here is Babok Builder. You just run it and tell him, hey, I want to have a new ransomware. Please create it. And after 2 seconds, you have it. So now there's 2 files. There is one which is for encryption with an E and one for decryption with a D. And as long as you're smart enough to send the right one to your victim, ransomware will already be on its way. I know not everyone loves the command line, so there are, of course, some GUIs as well. So here's a nice GUI one. Probably need to increase the price as, of course, energy bills have been rising everywhere, right? So even the ransomware guys, they want to make more profits. So after 2 minutes now, we have already our second ransomware created. And the last one here to show will be Chaos Ransomware Builder, also one which can easily be found on the internet, unfortunately. And this one even allows you to do some more advanced things like deleting backups or volume shadow copies. Because of course, the attackers, they don't really want the victims to be able to restore, and we can even delay the execution to make it a bit harder to actually find out where did I get myself infected with. You could change the icon and everything, of course, as well, but here we just want to create it. So unfortunately, it's very, very easy to create a ransomware. If you should ever get infected and decide to pay because you have no other option because they deleted your backups, that would be one of the screens you might see. So hopefully you will never see it, but that would be the decryption where you put in the code that you received, and then it starts decrypting, but that of course is not so fast. And unfortunately, nowadays ransomware is a service. So it actually comes with tutorials and tools like here for removing Sophos, Bitdefender, Trem Micro. So it's a thing to help the attackers uninstall security tools, like any service provider might have as well. But unfortunately here, they won't install a security tool afterwards, so they just leave you bare naked without any protection. And of course, I probably should mention here, don't do it at home, right? It's illegal, it's unethical as well, and there's already 400,000 new malware samples every given day. So nearly 500,000 new malware samples being created every given day. So there's definitely no need for you to create more malware as well. That's why I made it here for you in the video. But let's move on to kind of actually see how that would be distributed once it's happening. Let me see. So second part now here is we have the ransomware created as an attacker. Here my machine, so that's the victim's view. And we see, okay, so someone sent me a DHL delivery, but there's something wrong with the invoice, or maybe I should have another look. So I will copy that one and have a look at it, and of course check it if I actually get something that I need to act on. And in this case, well, it's downloading a Word document, which I open because I want to see what's behind it. And if I do so, I enable here the kind of active content, and from that moment on, it's game over. This was the one click that actually brings down your company, because if we close the Word, we see in the background, there's already a new process which has started. Here it's called sample.exe, using about 24% of my CPU, and it's starting to encrypt all the nasty things, as in all my documents, so that I can no longer access them. And therefore, just that one click can lead after 1 minute to your whole organization being encrypted. And you definitely don't want to be that guy. So if we kind of jump back and see what are the trends and changes that we see, well, we definitely see that the attackers are more and more misusing the living off the land technique. So what's already there, like PowerShell, like DLL reflective side loading, all of those things will be used more and more by abusing the infrastructure which is there. We also see that web threats are kind of getting a revival, and specifically for email and spam, we see that very often the attackers are abusing some of those services. So like an online calendar, and they might just send you invites from that legitimate application, so you think you actually received something, but it just points to a phishing website that tries to steal your passwords, or that tries to get you to download a malware in the end. Of course, we also see form jacking and MageCart, where they inject a JavaScript into an existing online web shop, but in the background it will steal your credit card while you do your shopping for the holiday season. And to make it even worse, as I mentioned for the evasion part, we see that they always will try to uninstall security tools which are local. So if your security solution does not protect themselves, it will be very tough for them to actually block it. But in the end, what is, of course, the interesting part is the attack against artificial intelligence. Because the attackers, they have long been using those kind of points where, well, they might actually find some weakness in the algorithm and use it to their benefit so it's no longer detected. Or we've seen that they use artificial intelligence to improve their phishing emails by actually going over different themes and kind of reiterate, so reinforced learning, to see which one was clicked, which one was not clicked, and then they just use the one which has a higher probability of actually infecting people. So the bad guys, they are definitely using artificial intelligence and machine learning to scale up their operation, to increase the speed and the frequency, and also to increase the rate of their success. And I guess now the question is, if the bad guys are doing it, well, do you, right? And kind of the question now to discuss is, how can you actually do it to make sure that this is not going to infect on yourself? Well, with that, back to you, Jeff.
Wonderful. Okay, so Candid, did you say did you say that, was it 400,000 or 500,000 new
For,
malwares a day? What was the number?
correctly, 400,000 or over 400,000 malware samples any given day. So nearly 500,000. That's kind of a big sandstorm coming your way. And the question is, how well is your castle protected? And we all know the sand comes in through every orifice, so you definitely make sure to protect yourself.
Well, that kind of begs the question. Roy, why don't you join us for this discussion real quick? So if the bad guys are creating 400,000 things per day to attack you, there's no way you can keep up on ahead of that. The only way you can do is to let your machine fight against their machine, right? So let's talk about how that fits. What's the state of AI or machine? You know what? I'm gonna take a step back. Hey, Roy, do me a favor. What's the difference between AI and ML? Everybody gets confused. So let's start there real quick.
Sure. So that's a really good question. Artificial intelligence, I think, is a very general term, which says, like a computer trying to mimic thinking. And machine learning is usually used more in the context of how it operates, or like the science or the math behind it. So I think that's like how I see it. It's sort of similar or contained within AI.
Okay.
But maybe back to the question. So how do you try to contend with hundreds of thousands of new malwares every day? So even before the age of AI, we had a lot of new attacks coming every day. But I think what's important to remember when you're talking about examples like Candid showed, is that they're created with the same tools, usually, not always, but usually. So a lot of them have a lot of common features, and that helps you attack a whole bunch of them, like a cluster of attacks with a single blow. You don't have to defend from each one of them separately because they behave similarly.
Okay, so let's wrap this together. I mean, the bad guys are coming, and they're making hundreds of thousands of tools a day, right? But we don't have the staff to keep up with that, right? There's just no way to do that. How and let's go to you first, Candid. How can we use AI and or machine learning? How can we use the right tool to help and protect ourselves?
I mean, AI and machine learning are very good in processing large data sets and finding the anomalies, right? So this is something where it's very good and very fast, and also not making that many human mistakes, just per se. So we can definitely use it to analyze data, being it all the files that you actually execute, or probably even better, to go for the behavior, what's happening on your machine. So if you have a process which is encrypting, let's say 50 files on your disk, and you can look by entropy levels, for example, if something is encrypted or not, then an AI algorithm or heuristic can, of course, analyze this and say, this is probably not something that Jeff wants to have on his machine, and just write out, block it. And this is exactly what Acronis CyberProtect does. So we analyze kind of normal behavior, and anything which is out of that will be blocked, and kind of any damage will be reverted or revealed. So I think that's where AI definitely can help finding those outliers and kind of automate the good behavior, and of course, blocking any bad behaviors.
Do you agree with that, Roy?
Yeah, definitely. I think a big change that machine learning and AI gave us is that instead of trying to manually find these thresholds of if the entropy rises above a certain level, then I should stop an activity. The machine learning algorithm can maybe help me find the specific threshold that I should do it at, or it helps me to see what new threshold I should set in the system. So it makes me more accurate. It helps me analyze the big picture, so I don't have to do it manually.
Okay, so let's talk about accessibility and availability. A quick little story. I remember, it's got to be 30 years ago when the first flat screen TVs came out. I was out shopping for one, and it was I thought this is going to be super cool. And they had a 19-inch, this is like cutting edge back, 19-inch flat screen TV, and it was $20,000. And I went, well, okay, I'm not buying that. So it was inaccessible to me, right? It was brand new technology. And so now let's tie that into what we're talking. Yeah, it's true, right? So let's talk about what we're talking about right now, right? When most of us hear AI and machine learning and automation, we think, oh, man, Elon Musk is over there inventing some sort of stuff, and I can't get it because he's a billionaire. Is this stuff accessible to normal MSPs who are just trying to keep the customers safe? Candid, start with that.
Absolutely, it is accessible. I mean, nowadays, machine learning and artificial intelligence, they're well-known and well-documented algorithms. Of course, we always fine-tune and develop new ones. But the beauty of it is that we can train those models. So we train it with hundreds of millions of classified samples, as in labeled data, so we know it's malicious or we know it's clean. We train that model, and then we have a nice, gifty little box that we can ship to the customer, and that does then all the answering. So you don't need to retrain it on the endpoint where you might not have enough CPU power, or it's going to use too much space, too much RAM to actually do that. And those models, they can be very small and very fast. Of course, we can have a look if we need to retrain them over time again and again, but it's not something that you need to do every hour. You can retrain every month and still be very accurate. And therefore, it doesn't matter if you're a global conglomerate or a 10-people business. It's very accessible, and it should also be that way because it helps you, if you don't have any resources, to maximize your protection with as little effort with human interaction as possible.
Do you have a comment on that, Roy?
Yeah, just totally on point. Just to stress the difference, it is a big and difficult task to train a model. You need a lot of data from a lot of sources, and labeling them is very difficult. But just like Candid said, once you've trained a model, once you found the magic numbers or you created that box, copying it and sending it over to a client is super simple, and any device can, or almost any device, can run machine learning models who were trained. So that's why it is accessible to anybody, anywhere, any device.
Okay, so the leverage point there, right, is this taking people's jobs, or is this making people better at their jobs? Which is that? Roy, you go first. Should I sit here and be worried that I'm a buggy whip manufacturer and that and Henry Ford just invented the car and I'm going to be out of a job next week, or should I be happy that you're making my life easier? Which is it?
That's a wonderful question. So just this morning, I saw a picture of a salmon fish in the river. And it was generated by AI, supposedly, but it was cooked salmon in the river instead of the fish. And that was generated by an AI, right? So it's the wrong interpretation of the sentence. So let me say that with a lot of guidance and professional people who are helping, you can create amazing things with AI, but to say it can understand complicated tasks and take over most people's jobs is not real soon, right? Yeah, specific jobs it's really good at, and others it still needs a lot of work.
What do you think, Candid?
Absolutely agree. I mean, we're not at the level of Skynet and Terminators, at least yet, and hopefully it won't be. So I'm not afraid. I would also say, as you said, it can help you be better at your job, or also help you to focus on your core job. Because very often we see, of course, that some companies, their core business is not IT security or cyber protection, right? They might be a dentist office or something else. And they want to focus on this. So they want still to be protected, but it has to be as efficient, as seamless as possible. And that's where artificial intelligence can, of course, help guide them through it. You can have expert-in-a-box systems where they can explain you what's happening and say, hey, I blocked it because of this and this, right? We came a long way. So I wouldn't be afraid of the whole technology. And as Roy pointed out, we still need people to train the models and label data and kind of develop the next thing. So it's not that we're removing all the jobs. Some of them might move a bit, but for the most part, I think you can concentrate on what you actually want to do, as in customer relation or building things, right? And I think that definitely helps for the overall part as well.
That's good. Yeah, I'll just toss in my own 2 cents because I'm kind of a practical, down to earth kind of guy. For myself, I don't worry about the machines because all you have to do is, like, say, go up to Northern Europe and get one of those automated lattes out of those Nespresso machines, and then the next day have one made. Go to Northern Italy and have some guy pull you a nice latte in Verona, and you say, okay, now the machines don't got us yet. Okay, so what's next, guys? Okay, so you guys think about this stuff all day long. Candid, you're in charge of research. Let's start with you. What's next on the horizon with AI and ML and how it applies to MSPs? What's next?
I think the salmon in the river example is a nice one with DALL-E and other kind of AI building new art. And it's fantastic and interesting what they can do, but it also shows that there are still some limitations. So I think we will get closer and closer where the systems are better in understanding kind of generic tasks. So not just one specific ones, but kind of a bit broader, and can better learn from people. So kind of shoulder surfing, learning what they do, and then probably, let's say at one point you just switch it on and it will take over, like a driver assistance in your car, right? Can do a lot of things on the highway. I probably wouldn't use it kind of around the block because there's still too many obstacles there. But for main part, they will be able to take over and help you kind of do the routine tasks. And I think that's where we go, at least from the protection side. And of course, the models will be more robust and, let's say, better in explaining themselves. So it's no longer just a black box, but it will actually be able to tell you, I think I detected it because of this and this. Because very often people start to doubt, right? If it's just blocking something, say, well, maybe it was a mistake. But if it can explain you why, it might help you to understand, oh, this really was a phishing email. I was just not paying attention to all the details.
That's a great summary. But Roy, same thing to you. What's next?
So I think like Candid nailed it. So I'll say it like from my perspective. I would call it like personalized models. So we see a lot of like big general models, and then you like usually fine tune them to your domain. And I think what we will see more and more, and I'm really guessing here, is that we will see like personalized models that learn really fast with like technologies like active learning, where you can sort of talk to the model, and the model will ask you like, hey, am I right? And you will tell him on the fly, like, yeah, this is really good. That's what I meant. Or no, you're like, this is nowhere near what I'm talking about. And he will learn on the fly and will develop to your needs, like personally to your needs. So we can think of like daily things like how to jog, and like, am I getting the right feedback from my watch or something? And it will just be very specific to you, very accurate, and we'll learn on the fly what you mean. So I think we will see more of these in the near future.
All right, that's a great discussion, guys. I feel smarter already. I appreciate your time on that. All right, so let's take this and let's bring it into the practical real world. We got a bunch of service providers who are watching us. Roy, why don't you take the screen and let's start with how this stuff is implemented inside of a Perception Point.
Sure. So actually, in Perception Point, we have like hundreds of separate systems, which are made of different layers. So showing everything is very complicated, and you need a lot of background. So what I will try to do is give you intuition as to how machine learning looks like, more specifically neural networks, if you've heard that term before. And the domain I've chosen is one I'm very passionate about, which is called NLP, Natural Language Processing, which is how do machines understand language? So like, let's say I'm getting a phishing email. How can a computer understand that this is what he's handling or seeing just from the text? So in 5 minutes, I'll try to give you some intuition as to how this is possible. Okay. So the task that we're discussing is how do you classify an email as a malicious email or a clean one, or a phishing email or clean or non-phishing. And instead of taking this specific task, I will show it on a more intuitive task, which is whether a sentence is hot or cold. You will see what it means in a second. And these are short sentences. And as you can see, there are many ways to express with words whether something is hot or not. So very warm, not hot, etc. So there are a lot of options, and knowing all of them in advance is computationally impossible. So what can we do? So what we can do is try and index the existing words, which is possible because there aren't that many words, and try to set them on a scale from freezing to burning and everything in between. And some things we don't know, so we just put them in the middle. And what can we do with that? We can create a model. So a lot of time, I'm sure you've heard the word model. What a model looks like can be heuristically like this. And let's say we take the short sentence very hot. We don't know the word very because we only know hot and cold, etc. So we give it a score of half. And we do know that hot is very hot. So we give it a high score between 0 to 1. 0.95 is very high. And when we do an average of these numbers, we get something which is higher than half. So if half is not cold, not hot, more than that is hot. So we can say that this sentence, very hot, is indeed hot. So this is a very simplistic model that tries to classify hot and cold sentences. But of course, this is not perfect because if I create this sentence, not hot, I would think, the previous model would think it's hot because it has the word hot and it doesn't know the word not, and it would get confused. So what can we do about it? So we can add dimensions. So instead of looking at one scale, we can look at two scales. One of them we try to classify like quantity, very, more, extra, little, less, etc. And the other one is the one we know, whether hot or not. And how can we combine these scales? So maybe you've seen this picture before. You use what's known as hidden layers. And here we have a complicated sentence and we have hidden layers. Now, it doesn't exactly work like this, but to give you intuition, it's pretty good. This hidden layer has two new nodes which try to evaluate different things. So one node will try to evaluate, for example, whether it's hot or not. And the other one will try to evaluate whether like the quantity, which might be like negative, not, and might be positive, which is very. And now we can try and compute these two scales separately. So this one will only take into account words it knows that are related to hotness. And this one only words that are related to quantity. And together we can try and estimate whether this sentence is now hot or not. Now, this, of course, is a very simplistic view of things. And I didn't tell you a lot of things. For example, how do you index all of the words and put them on scales automatically? How many nodes do you need? How many hidden layers, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the basic concept of neural networks. So like I said, the challenge is how do you generalize language or languages? What do you do with long sentences is also a difficult task. How do you automate the process of learning and inferencing? What do you do when you have dozens of models which are trying to predict the same thing? And of course, what do you do when you have hundreds of millions of nodes, which we, of course, have even more. So this is like a complicated task, and this is the world of data science and machine learning. But I hope I gave you some intuition as to how it is possible to try and evaluate a sentence using machine learning. Back to you.
That was very helpful. Thank you very much. You know what? So the next thing is Candid. Why don't you take a shot and do the exact same thing? Why don't you take and walk us through AI and automation from the Acronis perspective?
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Although Roy did such a fantastic job, I'm not going to go into the details of creating the model. Let me focus maybe on kind of the challenges that we see that some of the small and mid-sized companies actually do have. So we already talked about kind of the skill shortage, right? So most of mid-sized companies, they don't really have enough resources, being it budget, being it people, and of course also the expertise in the IT security and cyber protection side. And together with that comes also the complexity of the infrastructure, which is increasingly over time. At Acronis, we did a survey at the beginning of this year, and we asked companies, how many security solutions are you using in parallel? And the answer was that 22%, so more than every fifth, are using more than 10 security solutions in parallel. 22%, more than 10 security solutions in parallel, which, yes, unfortunately means that there are a lot of human errors happening. To be more precise, in the same survey, we saw that 42% of the organizations had some system outage due to human error. Misconfiguration, thinking that some configuration would actually work together, but then unfortunately figuring out it doesn't. And of course, that felt very bad for production going down. But let's assume you have all those covered. Well, then the question is, how good is your visibility across different silos, right? And silos could be backup and antivirus, but also cloud and local, right? Do you know who's accessing your data in the cloud? Would you know if someone takes that leaked API key and actually accesses your data and downloads everything? Or would you locally recognize if some ransomware gang is exfiltrating 2 terabytes of data to, let's say, Dropbox or a Box account? Would you actually notice this? And if you do you actually have an efficient and automated way of stopping it, right? It's nice and good if at the end of the month you get a report saying, oh, by the way, all your customer data and credit card information has been sent to the country of your choice. It's probably a little bit better if you can block it while it's happening, right? Where it says, hey, I've seen 2 or 3 going out, I blocked it, you probably should look at it. And of course, the best would be to have prevention so that it will never ever happen, or at least you can block it before any damage has happened to the company. So to bring it back to the artificial intelligence and machine learning, I see there's 3 main categories where machine learning can help. One is, of course, the automation task. In any IT organization, there's many tasks which can be automated. And quite frankly, they should be automated, as otherwise we're going to make those human mistakes. Because we might be on 2 or 3 different calls at the same time. We might want to get that coffee, or we might want to get home. So we might be distracted and not really paying attention. And that's how mistakes are happening. So having a machine learning model which can help us automate it, but also tells us if we make something which is not normal. So if you forget to actually check one of the boxes that we normally do, the system can either tell us or automatically change it to the default settings. And as we said on the second part, artificial intelligence is very good in finding those kind of needles in the haystack. Or usually it's kind of a huge haystack, because if we have millions and millions of applications and you want to find that one which is doing something that you don't want to have, well, if you do have to do that manually, it's still going to cost you a lot of labor work, a lot of expertise to know if it is something which is just strange but still legitimate, or someone who's really trying to steal your information. And as Roy pointed out, of course, we want to have that adapted to your environment. So depending on which country you're in, you might receive, taking the phishing email example, of course, phishing email in your local native language, right? So it doesn't really help you too much if the model is only trained on English language, if you actually receive it in Hebrew or in German or in French. So it has to adapt. And this is something where artificial intelligence can be really easy, in quotes, adapted to learn new environments and adapt whatever model you have to those given things. And last but not least, of course, it's the integration, so going across those silos. Because if you receive a phishing email that points to a malicious website, well, of course you want to block that email from all the other inboxes in your environment. But you also want to make sure that the URL can now be added to some block list. Or you might even want to see what has been downloaded. Maybe there is some malicious Trojan on the website as well. So you would want to block that as well. So integrate over all of those things definitely help you to be more efficient. And of course, in the end, as we said, if you don't have enough resources, that's kind of one of the only things you can go forward with. Integrate and consolidate to make it more efficient and more simpler as well, so less human mistakes. So I think those would be the 3 points I would want to raise where machine learning and artificial intelligence for Acronis is being used. But I know I could talk for hours. I guess the best thing is to have Dan actually show it to you to get a better understanding where Acronis is using AI.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, no problem. Dan, I think take over, man, because that's the next step. Let's see this magic in action.
Absolutely. You share screen. Somebody could relinquish their screen. There we go. A quick video and
welcome to this overview training of the X-ray dashboard for Perception Point. So as you can see, I'm in an account called CS Dave here. This is a parent account, so this would be my company organization. And then I have 2 customer accounts, which would be a Gmail domain and an Office 365 domain that I've set up in here. When we look at the Insights dashboard, if we're on the parent account, it's going to be an aggregate of all of the related data to the child accounts. If we were to switch this to a particular account, we would see just the data for that particular account. And a few interesting things to look at on this dashboard here. You can see the number of malicious and spam, total number of items scanned versus incidents, the particular layers that picked up those malicious incidents. So you can see that there's 2 incidents in this case, but there's more than 2 here on the right. That's because the same file could be picked up by multiple engines. These lists will be a lot longer when you have customers underneath. These will be longer lists, but you can see the most attacked people. You could target those people for additional education and training. You can see the top attacking senders, the top attacked organizations, and then if those organizations have multiple domains, you can also see which domains are attacked more often. Now, if we want to go into more detail, we can either click one of these layers and we'll get a filtered view of the scans that meet this filtered criteria, such as things that were caught in the anti-phishing engine, or we can just go to scans here at the top, and we can filter by a date range. So you could say the last day, we could say the last week. Here, we could base it on the verdict. So malicious, spam, clean emails, and this will filter the view to only show you those particular things. If the customer has more than just email or a collaboration channel, you can filter by the particular channel that you're interested. And then VIPs we cover in a different video, but VIPs essentially are going to be your CEOs and executives, people that are more likely to be the subject of a business email compromise attack and be somebody that you'd have set up already under a VIP. So taking a look here, there's a BEC example. We can dive in a little further. We can do a few things here at the top. So first thing would be preview the message. You could see this is just a text message. You could see fake person sending an email. Obviously, the person on the subject's not the person in the email. Now, say we thought this was a legitimate email and we thought it was actually clean, or we thought it was spam but not necessarily malicious, didn't need to be blocked. We could hit change verdict if we want to make that decision ourselves and add a comment, or we could hit request investigation. Request investigation will allow you to open a ticket with our IR team, put a few comments into why you feel the way you do, that it might be spam or a clean email. Likewise, with a clean email, you can do this if you feel it was malicious, and you could put additional information here, send request. The IR team will then review it manually and respond to you with the results of their investigation. You can remove the email from the system, or you can resend it. So if this was a clean email and the person accidentally deleted it, or if your connector was down, you couldn't get the message delivered and it was backlogged for some reason, you could resend the message. Additionally, you could blacklist, whitelist from here. As I mentioned, you could change the verdict. And you can also download it. So if you needed to do additional information, if you needed to investigate a particular malicious incident, you can download the file here. The file will be downloaded with a .danger extension appended to it. If you remove that extension, it will be an EML file that you can then open. If we look at some general information about the message itself, now this came from a Gmail. So if we click this who is information, you're going to get really generic stats because it came from Gmail. If it was a custom or unique domain, you'd see the number of emails sent from that domain, how many were marked malicious, if the sender passed SPF or DKIM if applicable. You can filter by just stuff sent from that person or just stuff sent from that particular domain. And then you can expand this to view the email headers as well. If we go back to the scans view and we look at something a little more dangerous here, a little more fun, we can see this was a more complicated attack. We can see a list of evidence, and then we could dive in further. So this shows the recursive unpacker really well. We can see an email was sent. So if we preview the email, we can see that it was a text email, that there is a password for a file inside of it, and then there was a zip file attached. So the recursive unpacker unpacked that zip file. Inside there was another zip file. Inside that was a Word document, and then a few files were dropped from the Word document. You can click on each of these and get results for each individual piece. Every component will pass through all of our layers. So if we go back to the message parent here and we scroll down a bit, you get the same information that you got during the last email example, but you can see here Office 2010 or 2016. We go ahead and detonate the payload, and you can view that happening here. And you can see a bit what happened when we launched the file. We're actually intelligent enough to grab that password out of the text in the email. However, if that was not available, we could also brute force attack, and we use multiple different types of techniques and attacks against that file to try to open it. You can see here that the dropper rule, you can see what it was dropping, the instruction pointers. So we do take, again, that memory map, and we take a look at the actual process threads. So you can see here at this particular point, this is where the files were dropped that were unexpected. We can see that Word was opened, then Explorer, and then all these other files dropped in. And then another really cool function is the macro analysis. So here you could see the actual code that's inside the VV macro that was malicious. And this is how we're able to catch zero-day attacks both for Windows and Mac environments. And then, of course, you can view the email headers. Now, a few other buttons inside of the dashboard here. Running scans, obviously, is just going to show scans that haven't completed yet. Once they're completed, they'll be in scans. This is unusual to have anything in because most of the scans are going to finish in about 30 seconds or less. Some of the scans only 2 or 3 seconds. So there's not usually a lot in here. The plus here is covered in another video. It's adding domains for new customers. The self-analyze tool is where you can grab a file or a set of files in a zip file, upload it for analysis, and it'll run it through our engines. Likewise, there's a URL analysis for you to do an individualized self-analysis on a particular URL. The messaging icon here lets you open up a ticket, so you don't have to necessarily hit request investigation on a particular email. You could say, I'm trying to figure this out with something to do with disclaimers or something like that. And this will open up a support request with the IR team, and you'll be able to get assistance this way for something a little more generic and not specific to a particular email. And the notification icon is just that, notifications for whatever is new inside of the product. Beyond that, when you mouse over your name, this is where you can edit your own profile, individual settings, and we go over these in some of the other training videos. But for now, that's a brief overview of the dashboard and how to use X-Ray.
Okay, now we're going to go through a quick active protection video here. Let's see.
Our devices, let's talk a little bit about antivirus and anti-malware. So if we go back to the same device, we look at our protection plan again, and we expand the antivirus and anti-malware section, we'll notice that we have active protection enabled. By default, when you create a new protection plan, this is enabled because it's a great tool that leverages behavior-based artificial intelligence to be able to stop ransomware in its tracks. We're able to notice when files are being encrypted, stop that process, and even revert those files from cache. So let's go take a look at what this machine actually looks like. So here we've remoted into that same machine. We have some files that are here, and they just contain some information about Acronis active protection. So it's easy enough. We can read the files, nothing is a problem. Now let's say that we received, the end user here received some kind of a link in an email. It was a file. They thought it was a legitimate file. Fairly common way for ransomware to infiltrate into an organization. It wasn't picked up by the traditional virus scans because it's a zero-day threat. And unknowingly, they go ahead and they click on that file. Well, we can see here it's identified, it's actually gone in, renamed and encrypted those files. But because we have active protection in place, it has actually caught that behavior, been able to stop the process, and then revert those files from cache. So if I go in and I open this file, we'll see that it is not encrypted, it's still readable. If we go back over to the console, and we look in the alerts, we notice there's now a new alert here for this particular device. We could also see that for the entire environment up here, but if we go to this alert, it's going to give us some detail, and it says that suspicious activity was detected, and it lays out exactly what has happened, that not only did it actually identify the behavior, but it was able to stop it and protect those files. So together, by having all of those things in place, the automation, the artificial intelligence, and the integration of having everything in a protection plan, you're able to protect a broad number of workloads easily and efficiently using Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. Thanks. Back over to you.
All right, so thank you very much. That was a quick overview, very quick, of Perception Point as well as active protection. And if you would like, we can do much more in-depth demonstrations, to talk to your account manager or reach out to us. We can do it on Zoom, things that may be unique to what you're trying to accomplish, or just a deeper dive in general. So let us know, and thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it back to Jeff.
Wonderful. I appreciate that, Dan. Dan, go ahead and stay on live for a second here.
Sure.
And, it's time for some Q&A. And I know we've got one active question that's in the Q&A function. Anybody else listening, if you want to add your question in, now's the time to do it. I also got one question on my DMs. But first of all, an observation. During the demo, Dan, the perception point part, we're talking about, you're mentioning a zip file inside a zip file inside a zip file, and the only thing in my head I could think of was nesting dolls. You keep opening it up,
Sure.
there's another doll inside, and you don't know if you got a treat or a trick until you get down to the bottom of it, right? That was an interesting little thing for me. Anyway, so let's start with a question, right? We have a question from Shamal. Shamal says, malware gets to the organization via spam most of the time. What anti-spam protection is there in the platform? And let's, who wants to take this first? I'm just going to open up to the floor.
Yeah, I can take that. So we have dedicated layer to handle spam, which is composed of various models. Like the internal model is named Lucid. It's a model that was developed in Perception Point, and the framework handles specifically spam. And the way you do it is by, like Candid mentioned before, you learn from a lot of examples of spam that we've seen before, and you extrapolate from it what is like the meaning of spam. So like I showed earlier, you learn like the scales, and then I don't have to see something in the past in order to respond correctly. So I can see a wholly new generated sentence and still respond to it sort of like a human, because I understand the context and I know English, so as a machine learning model, and then I can estimate that we're talking about spam. Now, of course, we almost we almost never use a single model exclusively. We almost always have like a security nets and we use multiple layers. So spam isn't managed with a single model. We have a lot of models that engage spam. But of course, we contain like the grand majority of spam we encounter, even if we haven't seen anything like it before. So I hope it answers.
You know, I'm going to build on top of that because, you know, the spam, you know, it's really hard. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but, you know, for some reason, you know, I get kind of guess I'm the family member who's in the IT business, right? So I'm everybody's tech support. All my uncles, my mom, I'm everybody's tech support. And so my mom said, hey, Jeff, I'm having a problem and with my computer, and I'm remote. She's in Phoenix, and so I'm trying to help her out. And I look in and I say, okay, well, she's gotten compromised somehow. She's gotten some spyware or something on here. And I finally dug through her email and I found how they got her, right? And it was an email that looked like it was from her insurance company. And dang it, it looked beautiful. It was really, really good. But there's a couple things because I'm in this business. It just red flags to my eye, right? And I started digging in. Well, let me view the source of this link. Where's this link really going? And it's not going to our insurance company at all, right? So I figured out, you know, I kind of worked my way through it and we solved the problem, right? But spam is, so you can't just rely on just spam, but you have to have something else. And, you know, Candid, I want you to address this because in the demo about the Acronis side of it, it talked about, you know, behavioral. It wasn't just finding the spam. It was trying to see what they did. And it was a differentiation between detection and behavioral detection. Could you expand on that just for a sec?
Sure. I think it's a good point that, of course, you need a multi-levered protection, right? As multi-layers that can protect you, even though if only 0.0001% of all the emails get through, it's still some that get through, right? And of course, there's a lot other ways as well beyond the email. So I always compare it with the car, where you have your seatbelt, you have your airbag, you have your ESP braking system and everything. So all of those together will give you the best protection. Still, if there is some other bad driver that hits you from the side, there's still a chance that you will have some headache afterwards. But nevertheless, you're still happy that you have your airbag. So for cyber protection, that means that if something gets through, we of course have machine learning that analyzes the malware before it's executed, just by kind of how it looks. And if it executes, we monitor all the behavior. So does it start a new process? Does it try to read out the passwords from your browser? Does it send them to North Korea or wherever? And of course, those would be all behaviors that we can block because we know it's something that you don't want to have. So again, right. It's kind of at all those stages we can intercept, and that's overall the kind of protection that you want, right? Filter as much as possible with email at the beginning, but if someone actually picks up the USB stick and puts it in, you still want to have a secondary opinion and kind of block those threats as well.
I appreciate that, guys. And you know what? I had one more question in my DM, but we are just completely out of time. So first of all, I want to thank all of you. Dan Scanlon, thank you for your time in the demo. Roy, great to see you again. We've done a couple things together. I hope we do a bunch more. Candid, always a pleasure to work with you. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time today on the webinar. Guys, let's do some housekeeping real quick. We have these resources. Now, don't worry about it. We're going to send you links to everything you need in a follow-up email, including this video, so you can play things back and say, hey, that's Jeff. Why is he there? He's the dumb guy on the call. Why did they put him on these calls? You can make any comment you like, but you'll have a chance to review that stuff and get it yourself and see these resources. So these are here for you. The cyber threat report, I read it cover to cover. It's really interesting. Tells you what's going on there in the world right now, and data like that I just love seeing data like that. But all of these are good resources. I also want to mention, well, first of all, I'm going to point behind my head. You see this screensaver? We got the Acronis CyberFit Summit coming up and Cyber Protect the Future. Holy mackerel, our biggest event ever. Go to acronis.com if you want to learn more about it. And I got a little fun for you. Closing celebrity keynote. Magic Johnson. It's pretty cool. So just check it out. We're having a lot of good programs. Make sure you see that. And I always want to point out that we have the Acronis Cyber Foundation. This is where Acronis we support building of schools all over the world. It is noble work. So if you want to know more about the Acronis Foundation, please go to acronis.org. And that said, thank you very much for your time. I'm sticking the landing, guys. We're right there at the top of the hour. 0-0, we're there. So thank you again. I hope you all enjoyed this presentation, and I hope to see you again on a future call. So bye for now, everybody.